Hey guys, and welcome back to Nomifactory. Thank you if you made it onto the live stream last time. I had a lot of fun there, and we now have a lawn base. No, we actually did get quite a lot done, including the assembly line automation you can see behind me. And as you can see by the quest, we pretty much finished all of LUV. If you didn't make the whole live stream, I'm going to try to catch you guys up here. So we started by optimizing some of our processing arrays here, and we now have one for extruder shapes, small gears and medium pipes. I believe also this one for lathes is new. Then we continued on with progression, crafting ourselves an LUV compressor to make the new tier of heavy plating, which meant that we were able to craft the tier 5 microminer here, and this gave us Nequada dust. The Nequada dust we are sending through a EBF to give us ingots, and then sending the ingots through with some silicon to give us Nequada doped wafers. Nequada also allows us to get our new tier of LUV blast furnaces here, the first one being for Draconium, and the second one being for Enderium. Enderium, along with some other crafting, allowed us to craft the tier 6 microminer, and with this we can get much more iridium and osmium for our microminer, along with some dragon eggs, which we have placed here on top of the reactor on a dragon egg mill. The Draconium you can see here did require us to get something called nitrodiesel, which we are making in this EV mixer here. It's a long chemical processing line, but ultimately we get nitrodiesel from this, and we combine that with dragon scales, which we can get from dragon DML. Once the hot Draconium comes out of the blast furnace, we put them into 2 vacuum freezers here, which used to sit over here at our HV line. The Draconium then goes into a wire mill to make Draconium wire, and we've built a 3rd vacuum freezer here in order to freeze this with molten nether stars, and this can give us superconductor wire. The superconductor wire now replaces all of the energy conduits in our base, and we now have a storage buffer of 93 billion RF. The superconductor wire is also something that we'll need for fusion, something that I think we're going to be getting today, honestly. I hope we can. Fusion is so much fun. It's time to build some donuts. Before we can build our donuts though, we have a few things to take care of first. I would first of all like to pick up the next tier of circuit, the first tier 8 circuit, which does require HSSE. You may remember we set up all of the high-speed steel on passive over here as dusts, HSSS and HSSE, which it appears we are now out of because we don't have chrome, huh? Let's put an end to that. Let's buy some more ruby. Oops, that's magnetite. As much as we can. Yeah, that'll do. That's enough. Let's send this through our processing. Yeah, so the high-speed steel now has its own blast furnaces over here for HSSS and HSSE. We need these for LUV and ZPM components. Let's get our first quest for the tier 8s. And the first machine we want to upgrade is the assembling machine to ZPM tier. However, to do this, we do need ZPM hulls. The ZPM hulls are made from iridium plates. This is no problem for us. However, we do need something called Polytetrafluoroethylene. Oh, another quest. UV circuits. Yes, Polytetrafluoroethylene, or go to hell. So, how do we make PTFE in this? Well, we need to combine tetrafluoroethylene and oxygen. Tetrafluoroethylene is made from hydrofluoric acid and chloroform. And chloroform, we need a lot of methane. Something that we had completely ran out of until we set up this on livestream. So what this processing array is doing is combining 4 IV electrolyzers, and we are electrolyzing water at an extremely quick rate for hydrogen and oxygen. Where the vacuum freezers used to be, we now have a second distillation tower over here. I guess a 3rd distillation tower. And here we're mixing hydrogen and refinery gas, one of the trash outputs that we're getting from oil. We had lots and lots of this still backed up, in fact. We are then hydrocracking that and distilling it down for methane, hydrogen, and helium. However, this does give us the bulk of our methane back, as we actually used to do this recipe here, methane plus water for extra hydrogen. So now that we have excess hydrogen, I think we now have all we need, besides fluorine, but we'll get back to that, for polytetrafluoroethylene. Alright, so here is going to be our system to make polytetrafluoroethylene. Not the cleanest of setups, but I mean, especially with things like this. Clean went out the window long ago. Next pack, we'll do aesthetics next pack. But time escapes us here, and we are missing tetrafluoroethylene here. Ultimately, we are missing fluorine from this. So how are we going to go about getting fluorine? Well, there's a bunch of different electrolyzer recipes here. The only really viable option though is to do biotite dust. I know for sure that we do need 2 IV electrolyzers for this, which we now have the cheap crystal circuits for. So over here at the nuclear reactor processing plant, we're making granite here from the igneous extruders, pulverizing that down for a chance at black granite and thorium dust. The thorium dust we send into thermal centrifuges over there for TBU for the reactor. However, this black granite dust we're not actually doing anything with at the moment. We can, however, electrolyze this. We're going to do this at quite a high tier. You'll see why we have to do this at a higher tier later on. This will give us silicon dioxide dust and biotite. Conveyor for insert. I'm really happy we fully upgraded those drawers. In fact, I added a second one there for black granite, specifically for this purpose. These two dusts are going to be given their own drawer. We will make sure to void the silicon dioxide dust. So how do we get fluorine from here? Well, we can actually electrolyze the biotite once again, and we get potassium, magnesium, aluminium, silicon, fluorine, and some extra oxygen. Yeah, hopefully this is fast enough, but we're getting our double fluids here, and we're getting all of these dusts. So the two fluids we store in quantum tanks, and we void excess oxygen here. The dust we store in the drawers, and we now have the fluorine that we need. So now back over here at PTFE, we can add fluorine to this interface. We mix this with hydrogen for hydrofluoric acid. The next chemical reactor over mixes chlorine and methane, which gives us chloroform, and also hydrochloric acid, which is stored here and trashed excess. And the chloroform is stored in the steel drum with a storage bus on. Then in this chemical reactor, we mix the chloroform plus the hydrofluoric acid. This should give us tetrafluoroethylene. And the tetrafluoroethylene is mixed with oxygen here for polytetrafluoroethylene. Storage bus on this. And we did it. We got go to hell. Very easy setup here. Alright, so at this point with PTFE, I went through and encoded the recipe for the ZPM machine hulls. And to start making the ZPM machines, we do need the ZPM components, the motor, the conveyor, the piston, and the robot arm. This is actually very easy to automate. Now that we don't have to use packaged auto for this stage, we can use the extended pattern terminal. There really wasn't anything else that we were missing, it's just a matter of encoding all the recipes. But now that we have all that, we can request our first ZPM machine, the assembling machine. This definitely does take a little while to craft since it has to hit the assembly line multiple times. And that thing, since we only have one, is quite slow at the moment. Any second now it should be finishing the last of these things though. So I think now that we have the ZPM assembly machine, I want to switch away from the circuit progression. And I would like to start looking at our Fusion Reactor Mk1. So we got our superconductor coil blocks. These are made with the superconductor wire that we have on passive here. However, I didn't realize that we also are going to need an implosion compressor. Yeah, so the implosion compressor, we do need TNT for, which you just saw me automate. But this thing we're going to stick at HV probably. This thing is already really quick to begin with. And we have a little space next to our multi-smelter here. So we're going to place input bus on the left, output bus on the right, and the rest is just solid steel machine casings. And we should have a multi-block structure. Yes, perfect. Let's give this its own named interface. And this can just go straight on the input bus here. And the output bus will just get its own interface as well, just to grab the output items from the multi-block, and this will put it all back into our system. This is just going to be on demand. But yeah, just to briefly explain this TNT automation, we are pulverizing sugar canes for sugar, and pulverizing polyethylene sheets for polyethylene pulp. We're then shapeless crafting that into tiny piles of polyethylene pulp, sending that into a chemical reactor with toluene. Toluene is one of the things that we get from oil distillation, one of the outputs of this thing right here. Toluene is then turned into gelled toluene, which is then combined with sulfuric acid, and this gives us TNT. So the TNT and the implosion compressor we need for fusion. I believe it's for fusion coil blocks, these things right here, which take neutron reflectors. And this takes reinforced iridium alloy, which takes the implosion compressor. As you can see though, it is only 1 second per recipe, so it's very quick to do. And we only need a couple of hundred in the end, so it's not something that needs to be on passive. But yeah, we can just add recipes for this, including the TNT in the pattern. This will go in our implosion compressor. Oops, I didn't plug it in. Oh my goodness, I didn't plug it in. Right? Yep, we're missing a cable right here. I guess while we're here, we can put the pattern in manually here. So we also need recipes for the machine controller itself, the Fusion Reactor Mk1. Honestly, it doesn't look too bad. Once we have the coil block, and I think we also need 241 plates. I don't know if we make 241. The quest for fusion also calls for 32 superconductor coil blocks. We have already 16. Can we request another 16? Yes, we can. Awesome. That's going to eat through so much Nether Quartz. I think we're actually running out. Yeah, we're down to 700. And we had 26,000 a couple of hours ago. So I think we're going to have to do something about that. This system over here for making Nether stars eats so much Nether Quartz. Yeah, we may have to address that this episode, honestly. Anyways, we also need 80 machine casings at LUV. And I think these are the ones that take Lumium. Yeah, 648 pieces of Lumium for this. Although we do have, I think, over 2,000. We used to have over 2,000, so this should be no problem for us. This is the reason why I wanted to have blast furnaces, especially for things like this on passive, so that we're always creating these ingots, so long as we have the input materials. Let's see, we also need the fluid input hatches, fluid output hatches. Apparently I don't have the ULV version, so let's add some recipes for these. I don't know if it has to specifically be ULV, but that's what the quest asked for, so we're going to have to pick those up anyway. And 16 LUV energy inputs. Yeah, we're waiting on this little thing here. Let's add some reception coils to this. That's a bit better at least. Oh yeah, there is another step that we have to do for these neutron reflectors for fusion coil. And this takes beryllium plates. I did anticipate this before the episode, and I did buy a bunch of beryllium ore. I think we can just smelt this, right? Yeah, and then turn it into plates this way. However, this does also call for an assembler with tin alloy. Tin alloy is not something that we were making until now, so it's just a matter of alloy smelting iron and tin together, and fluid extracting into the fluid, which we'll send into a steel drum. Fluid storage bus. Plug it in this time. Plug it in this time. Yep, there we go. That should be online. So, I think what we're going to do is recycle our LUV assembly machine, wherever that thing is. I think it's here. No, it must be on the other line. Where is our LUV one? Yeah, this one is the LUV one. Our ZPM one should be finished by now. I did have to overclock this assembly line. I realized this was only running at LUV, and the ZPM components obviously call for ZPM power, so I just doubled up the energy hatches here. There's our quest for the assembly machine. We're going to put this on our LUV line. This thing will get its own interface, and this will take all of our circuit patterns for now. So the one over here, LUV, instead of having tin inside, we are instead going to fill this with tin alloy. And then the new one for circuits here will just take regular tin. And that means we should be able to just encode the recipe for the neutron reflector. So, if I'm not wrong, we do also need plutonium-241, but we made that as part of another quest here, so we can just fluid solidify this. And look at this, we have everything for our Mk1 Fusion Reactor. Let's do this. There's our quest complete. So I added some more chunks onto our base here. I think we'll put tier 1 here. So we start with the casings on the bottom, the superconductor coils above that, and the energy hatches in the corners. Then we are going to need our input hatch and output hatch. And we're going to put 2 sets on this. So we'll put 2 fluid inputs, 2 fluid outputs. These I think can replace any of the casings. And the rest around the outside just has to be filled with the remaining casings. Oops. Okay, so we're somehow missing casings for the top here, but while those are crafting, we can hook up the energy for this. Oh, and it starts raining, great. So yeah, this fusion reactor we actually have to power with our own energy. This doesn't produce any energy directly. So there's a total of 8 energy input hatches that we've hooked up to power. There is ones on the outside as well, but I don't think we need to power those for the recipe that we want to run. Which means I think we can get away with a 16x LUV CEF. Yeah, and we have a connection up to power, which I've extended along from the processing arrays. Yeah, now that we've connected this up to power, once we form the multi-block, we should see this thing power up. Right now it's still invalid structure though. So let's start to look at the input items that we need for this, or input fluids. We need to make Europium out of this. And Europium is made in fluid form inside the fusion reactor with hydrogen and neodymium. This has to be supplied with 24,000 EU per tick to run, which we should be able to do with our LUV energy input hatches. So the hydrogen should actually be quite easy to add. I'm going to switch this out with another fluid input. Hydrogen we have lots and lots of coming out of this PA here. In fact, we're up to 65 million millibuckets. Is that right? Yeah. 65 million millibuckets, that's crazy. So yeah, we can just add a fluid interface here. And we'll just automatically feed this thing hydrogen once we hook it up to AE. Alright, so the input hatch is filled with hydrogen. The other thing we need is the neodymium. So neodymium is something that we get from ore processing, and it has its own blast furnace here, which makes us the ingots. However, we do need the neodymium as fluid, so I've hooked up a fluid extractor straight on the input hatch of this fusion reactor. We're going to place a chest and a conveyor to pull the items in. And if we check the recipe again, it's 1-to-1 neodymium with europium. And the europium I think we use as plates for basic fusion injectors, which of course we need for Draconic Evolution. And we also use this in the Mk2 Fusion Computer, as well as the final tier 8 circuit, the Wetware processor array. But I am a little bit reluctant to hook this straight up to AE, so I think we're just going to batch craft with this. And we're going to give the fusion reactor around 8 stacks of neodymium, which should equate to 8 stacks of europium, which I think is going to be plenty for us to get to tank. So yeah, that's going to get extracted, pulled into the input hatch, and then as the output hatch we get fluid Europium, which we want to solidify. Now we just have to complete our multi-block structure here. I don't know how we ended up so short on casings, by the way. Quest calls for 80 and you need way more than 80. I mean, I guess you can replace these with fluid input hatches here. Yeah, this one should be our last casing. Nope, one more. Or can we just not have more than 2 fluid input hatches? Oh, I see. Maybe this is for fluid output only. I think maybe we have to switch the hydrogen over to this side. And that means we can just send the neodymium from the fluid extractor backwards instead of down. And now maybe it forms the multi-block? Aha! Oh, wait a second, it's already started. And I forgot to soft mallet this thing again, but it looks like we're already getting Europium out of this, which is a very good sign. I also do have this extra neodymium. I think we can just place it here with a pump on the side, since we did carefully measure out how much neodymium we need, and I want to make sure this gets it all. But yeah, this is going to be quite a slow process. It's 3.2 seconds per recipe, for 16 millibuckets. I think the quest calls for an ingot though, so let's make sure we fluid solidify an ingot at least. There's our quest. Let's make sure that we're not losing too much power from our power network, power buffer. No, it seems that we're still positive on power here, which is good. It means that we can run this thing indefinitely. But yeah, we have our first donut. Probably the best looking one. The tier 1 I think looks the best. You'll see when we build 2 and 3. Okay, so now that we got Europium production going, I think that we should look at our circuits again. And I would like to pick up these next tier 6 circuits, which does require Wetware. So Wetware boards is the last tier of circuit boards. It's not something that we can make just by adding another chemical reactor to this setup here. This does require some extra processing and to be done at IV tier at least. So we have to make both draconic stem cells and sterilized growth medium. The stem cells also require the growth medium, so I think we'll start with growth medium. Wait, hold on, we may have to detour here just slightly. So I went to send more tier 6 microminers for the dragon eggs. However, as you can see here, we're now completely out of nether quartz. So I think we do have to prioritize this, because we do need also nether stars. Okay, so I've prepared a bunch of materials for this. We're going to start with a cobblestone generator again. Into 2 pulverizers. You guys know the script now. Cobblestone to gravel, gravel to sand. Sand will give its own drawer. And we're doing this separate again just to make sure that it is fast enough, and we'll make it all at IV tier. Instead of the single block furnaces though, we will build a multi-smelter here. So we want this straight into the input bus and straight out to the output bus. I think we may run out of room here, hold on. Yeah, so the multi-smelter will build out around here, and I think we may as well use the superconductor coils for this. If we use it on the multi-smelter, then it does give us a 4x energy discount, as well as a speed boost on smelting. So this is the absolute fastest you can go. I mean, why not, right? If we already have these on passive. So this smelts all of the sand into glass. Check out the speeds on that. Wow, already a full drawer. And then to get glass into nether quartz, I think we just have to electrolyze, right? Yeah, we just need to electrolyze, and we'll have 2 for this, I think. So we can place 1 here and 1 here. Controller slave in the middle. And you know what? Since we're already going overkill, we may as well use LUV conveyors. Sure. Anyway, then 2 drawers for output, 1 trim in the middle, and a controller here. Once our assembly line finishes over there, we can put the LUV conveyor modules, and we'll have to item filter these for specifically glass. Import. This makes us nether quartz, and we just output this to the drawer above. And same for this one here. Give this other guy some power. And that is super, super fast nether quartz here. We might as well give some upgrades to the glass, since this is also on the drawer network. Actually, we don't need that much glass, do we? No, we don't need that much glass. We'll save the power, I think. We'll upgrade the nether quartz at least. Lock the drawers, and I think all we need now is a storage bus. This will be given high priority. And this is probably all going to disappear to fill the buffers. Oh, speaking of buffers, I didn't lock the drawer. There we go. It looks like the smelter here is blinking a little bit. We may have to add a second pulverizer here for sand. Is the buffers filling below? No, the input bus is empty. Output bus is perpetually full, but that is technically a good sign. But we're not able to saturate 2 IV electrolyzers here. You know what? I think we'll leave it for now. If it turns out we need much more nether quartz, then we'll address it. But hopefully once it catches up to the buffers, it should be okay like this. Either way, it's going to be much faster than this MV machine, making nether quartz that used to do this. Okay, so back to our quest at hand here. We need to make sterilized growth medium. And one of the things that is most difficult to get out of this is mincemeat. This guy is about to have a very unlucky day. Sorry, chicken. Yoink. These guys we are going to powered spawn. And The raw chicken here we can actually pulverize straight into mincemeat. So we basically just have to find a way to farm these guys. There isn't any mob grinding utilities or anything in the pack. I believe there is some sort of spikes though. Yeah, I think diamond spikes is what we used last time. But diamond spikes is no fun. Let's let's spice this up a little bit, I think. Aha, all in the name of circuits. Oh my goodness, this is so cruel. Okay, let's at least sound muffle this. So these poor chicken here are being subjected to LUV power. We got an LUV CEF here, hooked up to some signalum cable. It doesn't even actually consume any power, right, since we're not actually sending this to any machines. But any live uncovered cable does do some damage to anyone who touches it, including me, so I have to be careful. But yeah, it's just a very simple setup here. We have a vacuum chest to pick up the outputs. All goes into a drawer network, which we may as well upgrade. Make sure to put the void upgrades on this. We don't want this to spill out with chicken everywhere. And I think we also need a filter for the vacuum chest, just in case it picks up rubber tree saplings, since we still get some drops next door here. You can see some of the chickens do tend to pathfind this way for some reason. I'm not sure what they see over this side, but it doesn't normally last very long. I think they should all hit the wire eventually. Unfortunately. But it has to be done. We need mincemeat. These guys can survive though. These guys have got a lawn base. So yeah, now we just have to turn all the mincemeat into growth medium. And for this we need a fluid heater and we need a mixer, it looks like. And I guess a pulverizer for the mincemeat. Yeah, so I think we'll set all of this up at IV, next to where we have TNT. We'll start with the pulverizer for mincemeat. This looks like it's going to be fast enough, honestly. So long as we can farm chicken fast enough. We'll need a second pulverizer here for sugar. Since sugar, we can't shapeless craft here. We have to use a mortar, I think, one of the tools. So it's easier just to do it in the machine. We can add sugar cane to this interface here and conveyor to pull it into the machine on import. Alright, so that gives us sugar and mincemeat. Last thing we need is tiny piles of salt, which we can do in a crafter. Assuming we actually have some salt left, we may honestly be making it all into chlorine at this point. Oh no, it looks like the buffers have filled. Alright, so all of these things I think will give their own drawer. These two can just automatically output their contents. But this crafter here does need at least an item conduit on the side. And we'll get some trim on the top to connect the drawer networks together. Man, that looks so ugly. It gets the job done though, that's the most important part. Alright, so from here we need a mixer with all three of these dusts and distilled water. I didn't realize this had to be distilled. So the mixer we can place here. Then we can set a limited item filter on the insert of the mixer from a drawer controller above, which should pick up all of these dusts. Maybe get some extract speeds on this. And then as for the distilled water, I think we can just do a single block IV distillery here. Aqueous accumulator above. This will need its own power source. And I think we also need configuration 1 for this. I hope. No, it's config 0. There we go, we're getting distilled water. This can go below. This is going to make us raw growth medium, which has to go into a fluid heater. This one is mixed with config 1, and plug it in with some power. And we get sterilized growth medium, nice. And this is what we use for all of our wetware circuits, and the wetware circuit boards. So the question is, do we quantum tank this? The only thing I'm concerned about out of all of this is actually the salt, although it is tiny piles to be fair. Maybe for now we play it safe and we'll go for just a steel drum, since it's quite quick to make this. And we've built in buffers along the way, so it's going to be fast to refill this buffer if we need more. Yeah, we'll give this a fluid storage bus, and we'll swap out if necessary. And we got our quest, awesome. Oh, I can't put this back, of course. Okay, so the next step in our quest is to make draconic stem cells. This is a very, very slow recipe, something that I remember waiting a long time on the last playthrough. It's 300 seconds starting at LUV, so it's quite unlikely we're going to get an overclock on this. So I think we're immediately going to put this into a PA. Even if we don't put too many machines in it first, it means that we can easily upgrade this. So we have to start at least at LUV. I don't think we have the LUV chemical reactor encoded. I think we're missing the rotor recipe. Yeah, the chrome rotor. Hopefully we have chrome. Yeah, we do. We have a lot of chrome from earlier on. So this processing array isn't going to be like the rest of them. I think we'll put it on this side actually. Anyway, we have to give this thing at least ZPM power. Just to be able to upgrade it in the future, since these are going to be LUV machines rather than IV machines like the rest of these PAs. That means we'll need to make a ZPM CEF. Missing recipes for Enderium wire. So the input for this we definitely want to make ULV. And the output bus will be the same, both at ULV. I'm really hoping we can actually power this. Oh, I was one short. Oops. So if we want to have at least 16 machines in here, eventually, it means that we do at least have to put on an IV fluid input for this. since Draconic stem cells take 10 buckets of growth medium per recipe. So 16 machines at once would be 160 buckets per cycle, and this is 256, so we have to go at least up to IV for this. And then we'll put a fluid interface on the side here to supply the growth medium. I think it'll be sterilized, right? But as for the input items, since it takes dragon eggs right now we can only get from the Microminer tier 6 mission, although eventually we can get it from the tier 7 and also tier 8. But we definitely don't want to use all of our dragon eggs for stem cells, since they're also used in Draconic Fusion crafting. And even stuff like this, we need to passive, so we have to find out some sort of a way to limit this. So, I think something like this is going to work. We will just level limit the extract from the interface. So here we can request our dragon eggs, maximum of 16 here. And we'll make sure to put an extract speed so that hopefully it sends more than one item at once, and this thing won't start with just one recipe worth. But yeah, we have this active with a signal, and we emit a signal when we have below 128 draconic stem cells. That number is almost definitely going to change as we get access to easier dragon eggs, but if we put in this LUV chemical reactor, it does turn on. Yeah, it's 300 seconds, so we're going to be waiting a little while for this, but we are just going to output this straight to a drawer. And that is just going to be passive stem cells for us. Just to buff up our production of dragon eggs though, I'm going to send a few more tier 6s. Yeah, the egg recipe. Let's see if we can get another 3 or 4. This is a very expensive microminer for us at this point though. But it looks like we can send this. So we get a half stack of dragon eggs at a time. So that's going to be another at least 2 stacks of dragon eggs. That will be enough to keep this going for quite some time, I think. But yeah, after this, there is still wetware boards to make, which is a separate process entirely. However, I think we will save that for next episode. We've been going a little bit long today, and I don't have so much time left today. Our fusion reactor is still going here for Europium. We have a couple of stacks built up at least. That should be more than enough for us to start next episode with. The Nether Quartz over here seems to have caught up. We're now actually filling this drawer. And I think this is where we're going to leave it. So, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all soon for some more Nomifactory.